Good afternoon, Michael Malice here. Let that be your welcome for the next hour. We have with us one of our favorite returning guests, comic Dave Smith, host of Part of the Problem, 1/3 of the Legion of Skanks. His comedy special Libertas is available now and is highly recommended by me and everyone else with a good sense of humor. Dave, thank you so much and welcome back to the show.
Thank you. Good to be home.
So you are back from a trip to Austin, doing a tour on Rogan. Congratulations on that. Were you at all nervous to do Rogan, given that this was just on the heels of that kind of organized hit on him?
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't exactly nervous. I was up. I was like really up for it. I was kind of, it was kind of a little bit surreal where you were like, wow, this is quite a time to do the show. And this is like, I realized that this was like a real big opportunity. I was really excited about it because I thought, like, I remember actually thinking in my head that I was just so glad that it was either me or you. I was like, of all the guests Rogan has, and he has like some incredible guests, but I was like, the person to have right now is either me or Michael Malice, because the corporate press is coming at you like in this crazy way. And you need one of the two people whose like expertise lies in how evil the corporate press is. And so I was really excited for, like, I was like, this is going to be fun to really be like, oh, spreading misinformation. Let's take a look. Let's take a look at what misinformation has been spread. And it would have been fun for me and you to be there together. We could have done an entire 3 hours on all of the misinformation the corporate press has spread throughout history and what the results of it have been. And so anyway, I love, like I'm like you. I love moments like that. I like to be like, oh yeah, I get to speak in this, on a big platform in this really cool moment about something that I really care about. So I was excited for it. But yeah, I definitely I don't know. I wasn't like nervous, like in the way I'd be like when I used to do stand up when I first started, and I'd be nervous to get up on stage. But I was like, there was an energy about it for sure. Like that I was like, this is a big one.
One of the things that I was very heartened to see is how many people publicly went out of their way to support Joe, and that they didn't do it in an ambiguous way. They didn't say it like, well, while I don't agree with everything Joe Rogan says or does, I do still think he does more good than harm. No, they didn't say that. They're like, Joe's a good guy. He's a good guy. This is nonsense. I stand with him. Here's the other thing, which I think is a big disadvantage. And let's steelman this argument. Let's pretend Rogan really is a bad person and the people at CNN and all these operatives are the good guys. Let's pretend. It's really, really hard to paint someone as something when one audience sits down with you for 3 hours at a time and has conversations that meander everywhere. And we've all had conversations where you're hanging out with your buddies and maybe you start talking about your girlfriend's, like intimate moments, or like you start talking about your family. And then later you're like, oh, wow, I wouldn't want this broad, you know what I mean? Like serious stuff, as opposed to you have an 8-minute segment of Anderson Cooper and you're trying to narrow down a very complex issue into sound bites, and you're there to represent the Republicans or Democrats. You can't really get into the nuance, the nitty gritty of it. There's not even space to kind of change your position because you're there to represent the Mitch McConnell argument, or you're there to represent the Trump is bad argument. So just in that sense alone, you're going to have much more of an emotional bonding and a sense of intimacy for the 3-hour guy, even if he was the devil.
Yeah. And it's so much more, just the format of like what Rogan does is so much more authentic and real. Even if you thought he was bad and they were good, you just have this format of like what, like the corporate press has this thing that I don't know when it was invented, but I mean, it's kind of morphed a little bit, but it's like the Tom Brokaw type thing where it's like, tonight at 9, Gorbachev says this, next up, like it's this, like real people don't talk this way. This is like this robotic thing that you're doing. It's like, and they know it. It's not like anyone doesn't thinks this is how they talk at a bar. They're just like, this is how you deliver the news.
Yeah.
Next at 7, blah, blah, blah. And Rogan's just like kind of sitting there and he's like, hey brother, you want a whiskey? We got some over there. No, you're good. Cigar? Oh, okay, cool. So what was the thing you said the other, like, that's the tone of Rogan's podcast. It's just like a very, and yeah, I mean, you're talking about people who have, I mean, Rogan had, is almost up to 1,800 episodes. They're 2 to 3 hours a piece.
Yeah.
I mean, this is people who listen to him have listened to an unbelievable amount of content by him. It's very hard to convince them that they don't know the person who they're listening to in these long conversations. And I would say that obviously what you said is true, right? Like there are things you would say off. I mean, there's things I would say to you in a conversation that I wouldn't say on this podcast, but there's nothing I'd say on this podcast that I wouldn't say to you, if that makes sense.
Of course.
Right. So like, there's some things I wouldn't say, but I'm not lying about anything I do say. And I do think that like in a conversation like this with me and you, people more or less get who we are. There's not a huge gap between what a conversation with me and you would be off air or this, just that I might give out some personal information to you that I wouldn't feel comfortable sharing with, like the entire world, or at least the entire world that listens to this. But I'll say, as someone who knows Rogan, and I think you know him too, and I think you'll agree with me on this, he is that guy. He's the guy you see on air with the same thing, might say something to you off air that he wouldn't say on air, but he's that same guy. You go hang with him, you talk to him off air, he's the dude you see. And his audience knows that.
Between the three of us, Joe has the smallest ego. I have by far the biggest ego of the three of us. But like in terms of hanging out, it is so easy to bust his balls. And he is so, as a bro, receptive to that.
He is a very humble person, which is very strange. He might be the most humble out of the three of us. And
by far.
which is very strange because he has the most reason
by far
to be like, get the fuck out of here.
Even if he was just like a judo champion, he's still better than us.
Yeah, it's just his least accomplished thing is still way cooler than
forget Fear Factor, forget the years of working as an actor,
the money, the platform, all of it. Just that he could kick either one of our asses very easily. He should be able to feel that way.
What about just being a UFC commentator is already better than both of us?
Yeah. Well, dude, I talked about this recently, that moment when he had Gupta.
I'm sorry. He's hanging out with Elon. We're hanging out with Lewis. We're not the same.
Yeah. Our friend is a business tycoon. Our friend owns 2 podcast studios. Okay. There's an A and a B.
Yeah.
What's Elon got going on? But dude, I remember that moment when he was talking to Dr. Gupta from CNN. Yeah. And you could tell, which is very rare because I think Rogan really is a guy who's like, he's been around for a long time, and he was like kicking people in the head when he was like 18, and he's, older, and he's married, and he's got kids, and he's done a lot of DMT and a lot of meditation and a lot, like he's worked on himself. So he's not like, he doesn't have that like out of control ego, but you could tell the CNN thing pissed him off. You could tell that bothered him, that they were saying he took horse pace in this shit. And when that moment with Dr. Gupta, it was like a step out of character for Rogan when he was like, they're saying I take horse medicine, blah, blah, blah. And Gupta's like, well, and he goes, I can afford people medicine, motherfucker.
Yeah.
And there was like this moment where you're like, ooh, you don't usually see that out of Rogan, because he was so attacked that he felt like being like, it was a little thing there, like, I got more than all of you motherfuckers. Don't fucking like come at me like that.
We also and I know we're kind of rehashing this, but people need to be reminded, there was no way they weren't being dishonest. And here's why. First of all, there's like 4 ways they were being dishonest. First of all, he went to his doctor and got all these things prescribed. So this idea that he's kind of was like, I'm Joe Rogan, I'm talking to Alex Jones. Alex Jones told me to take ultra male vitality. That cured my COVID. That was not the claim. Everything he did was under medical supervision. And if you ask anyone, no matter how blue pill they are, do you think Joe Rogan has access to quality doctors? It's nonsensical, especially with where he's working with like UFC athletes. These are going to be doctors who are focused on human performance and all sorts of things on unusual situations and injuries. So that's off the table. Number 1. 2, he gave a list of medications he took. So if you list 10 medications and they only focus on one, that's a lie. It's completely disingenuous. He didn't say, he said, I did this and then this and this, and they focus on that. 3, you can't say ivermectin is a horse medication, because it's not a horse medication. It's in addition to a human medication, which they knew. But even if you didn't know that, it's a veterinary medication. Use it for horses, use it for cats, use it for dogs. To specifically say horse is also disingenuous, because someone thought of that and they're all saying it, but it's not true, even in that regard, that it's uniquely or especially used for horses. So to claim that he was telling people that they should take it was also a lie. It's impossible to say that he went and said, don't listen to your doctor, listen to me, only take horse medicine. So there were so many like how if someone makes a mistake, you're like, okay, they got it off. Then two, it's like, okay, at a certain point, you're like, this can't, as Rand says, errors of this magnitude are never made innocently. You are doing something intentionally. And then to watch it spread while everyone had access to the same Instagram story, it's not like, Ari Shafir reports that Joe, you were watching the same clip I watched. And I'm sure he went back and watched it again. Like, did I just focus on the ivermectin? And he saw it didn't. And then, number 5 or 4, when they ran the filter on him to make the colors look different. And number 5, when the fact checkers said there was no filter. Did you see that? Did you know that?
That I did not see.
There were fact checkers.
They
go,
no.
Said that? They actually said that.
Wow. It's like, wow, how fucking stupid do you think people are, man?
They're not stupid. It's easier to train a smart dog than a dumb one.
No, I'm saying, how stupid do you think the people are that they would be told, oh, there's no filter on that? Well, yep, I guess they're right.
But it sure did look different. You're misunderstanding me. That's how marginally smart people work. They don't trust their minds. They're going to trust the authorities.
Right.
So a dumb person and a really smart person will be like, this is nonsense. But someone who's marginally smart is like, well, that's not what it looks like. I'm smart.
I don't know. I read the fact check. And it turns out, right. Okay. I see what you're saying. Right. So there's all of that. And then, and as you touched on there too, the fact that it like permeated through the entire corporate press, and that you don't see one anchor up there going, hey, there's some things that don't add up about the way this is being presented by everyone else.
The fact that it worked. That's the one thing that doesn't add up the most. He's alive and healthy.
Yeah, it's like, what? Yeah, you idiot. You can't do it like that. And he's like, ugh, you beat it in a day, but like, you just can't do this. Yeah. Like, it was, what the fuck? So bizarre. The whole thing is so bizarre. But anyway, this one though, going in and doing the show the other day, I mean, this was like so much different than that, where it was like, dude, not only with all of the COVID stuff, not only with all of the Spotify artists and stuff, but then with the fucking hit piece video that they did on him. And then with it was like the amount of focus that was on him was just unbelievable. And it is, I mean, I've done the show several times, so I've never gotten like a response like this time, because I think it was just everyone. I also think they've driven more eyeballs to him, if that was even possible. So that's kind of a beautiful thing.
You're Welcome is brought to you by Progressive. Now, Progressive helps you get a great rate in car insurance, even if it's not with them. They have this nifty comparison tool that puts rates side by side, so you choose a rate and coverages that work for you. So let's say you're interested in lowering your rate in your car insurance. You go to progressive.com to get a quote with all the coverages you want. You'll see Progressive's rate, and then their tool will provide options from other companies, all lined up and easy to compare, so that all you have to do is choose the rate and coverages you like. Progressive gives you options so you can make the best choice for you. You could be looking forward to saving money in the very near future. More money for, say, a pair of noise-canceling headphones, an Instapot, more puzzles, whatever brings you joy. Get a quote today at progressive.com. It's one small step you can do today that can make a big impact on your budget tomorrow. Progressive Casualty Insurance and Affiliates. Comparison rates not available in all states or situations. Prices vary based on how you buy. Hey guys, you know how it's hard to find a fast pre-cooked meal that isn't frozen or tasteless or highly processed? They're all gross. Trust me, I've tried. Food that's fast doesn't have to be fast food. Freshly offers quality meals without the hard work. Their meals are designed by nutritionists, cooked by chefs, and delivered fresh. Other meal deliveries need to be prepped and cooked. Theirs is ready to eat in 3 minutes. You don't want to spend an hour cooking dinner after a rough day at work or an infuriating commute. Takeout doesn't have to be your only option for an easy dinner. Whether it's for you or your family, Freshly gives you convenience, flavor, and nutrition. They sent me a bunch. They're very smart. And I tried them and I like them. And it's a lot better than the frozen stuff you get because it's never frozen. You get fresh, ready to heat meals. You can enjoy them in just 3 minutes. So stop stressing about dinner. Right now, Freshly's offering our listeners $40 off your first 2 orders. All you have to do is go to freshly.com/welcome, FRESHLY.com/welcome, $40 off at freshly.com/welcome. Skip the grocery shopping, skip the dirty dishes. Your meals arrive cooked and fresh every week. And they have new ones every week. So you're never stuck eating the same thing over and over. Let's get back to the show. I think people need to take a step back and appreciate a couple of things. First of all, they threw everything they had at him and didn't work. He's not canceled. His show's not over. It's not something where like, well, his show's radioactive. You can't go on now to ruin your career. That's what they wanted to have happen. They couldn't go after him. Let's make it so no one can go on that show without feeling humiliated. That didn't work. And also, I think a lot of people realized how overnight, I think it was literally overnight, Joe Rogan has to be stopped from spreading COVID misinformation. And he's like, I'll bring on plenty of doctors. That's a great criticism. Let's do it. And when that happens overnight, it's Joe Rogan's a racist. And you don't have to have any political persuasion to see how quickly and the narrative changed and what the continuous goal was in both those cases.
Yeah.
And it didn't work.
So that's the really big thing there, that it didn't work. And I think that there was one thing that I was saying the other day, like this was kind of bugging me. And it was more from like people, I think in our camp, like our type of thinkers and some like fans of ours, who were saying, and it's not that I don't understand this, and I even partially agree with this, but they were going like saying like Rogan really fucked up by apologizing. You don't apologize. Everyone knows the rules. You don't apologize to the mob because then it just makes the mob worse and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, look, that is kind of my instinctual hypothesis as well. And if Joe, like I'm friends with Joe, but I'm not like friends with him, like he's not like calling me the night before, like, what do you think I should do about, like if he was, and he was asking my advice would have been not to do that. Like my advice would have been at least to do it in a different way. I'd have been like, don't like give him too much of an apology. Maybe like say something like, be like, I used to, if the word came up, I just said the word, but now I don't do that anymore. Cause like, I've just heard back from Black people that bothers them. So it's like, I don't know. I love a lot of Black people. I don't want to offend them. So I don't do that anymore. Do something like that. That would be my advice. But then again, I'm also humble enough to go, hey, what the fuck do I know? And maybe Joe Rogan knows a thing or two more than I know about how to, but hearing these people, like even the people in our camp being like, everyone knows the rules. You don't apologize to the mob. It's like, okay, you're telling me there are rules for this situation. This situation has never happened before. You have a guy who's bigger than the entire corporate press combined being attacked by the corporate press and winning. And it's a little bit, I'm sorry, this is different. This is different in scale and kind than anything that we've been talking about before with these cancellation mobs. You also don't just have, when you have audiences like the size of ours, and we have nice size audiences, but it's a whole different thing to have this like huge, Joe Rogan has like a huge chunk of America listens to Joe Rogan. And there are a whole lot of those people. Like we have a pretty red-pilled audience. You know what I mean? Like Joe Rogan has a whole bunch of normies who listen to Joe Rogan's show, who maybe the move to handle it there is to be like, like, hey, I'm sorry, I was wrong to like do this, but blah, 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 or whatever. I don't know. You know what I'm saying? I'm just like, it's like the certainty that some people have, like he broke the rules. And it's like, well, here's what it looks like right now. He's bigger than the entire corporate press. He gave a huge middle finger to the corporate press. They came after him with outside of Trump, the largest cancellation attempt that I've ever seen, and they failed. So at least it
was more systemic than the campaign against Alex.
Oh yeah, absolutely, no question about that, no question. And partly because he's much bigger than Alex Jones
right,
was. But you're actually absolutely right.
So and here's the other thing. Here was another concern that seems to have been nipped in the bud, because we know how bandwagoning is a thing. There was a legitimate, not ridiculous concern that after Neil Young and Joni Mitchell and India Arie, and maybe there's some other bands that I'm not aware of, who pulled their music from Spotify, that this would be the virtue signaling thing to do. I don't want my music on Spotify. And nope, that didn't happen. To my understanding, it completely stopped.
Yeah, that was something that I thought actually had some potential to work, because you go like, so if Neil Young comes out and says, well, it's either me or Joe Rogan, it's like, okay, first of all, I don't know exactly, because I know Neil Young's music is available on other platforms as well. So he's not exclusive to Spotify. However, Neil Young is that's Neil Young. Like Neil Young is fucking, has classic songs that everybody I know loves. Like, and he's got really mass appeal. Like everybody likes Neil Young music, like that I know, I guess not everybody, but it's really, these are songs I listen to with my kid that you could also listen to, with like your friend,
your
like
parents. Yeah,
exactly. Really, but there's a few dynamics that are like, number one, Joe Rogan has a really huge audience. I think more importantly than any of that, it's not just that Joe Rogan is exclusive to Spotify. People came to Spotify for Joe Rogan.
Yeah.
I don't know that anybody came to Spotify
Why
for
would you?
Neil
Right. It
Young,
doesn't make
right?
sense.
So it's he didn't have the same leverage there, but you did start to see when you look at that, you go, okay, so Neil Young isn't going to take out Joe Rogan. However, if you had, you know, Beyonce and Taylor Swift, and you started to get like really big artists, and you had a few of them put together, that might be a situation where actually now the incentives would be for Spotify to. So that was a thought in my head, but as you said, that doesn't seem to be materializing.
Let's switch gears a little bit because I'm sure you've talked about this on your show, Part of the Problem, and I'm very curious to hear your thoughts. What has been we're recording this Tuesday evening. This is going to drop, 24 hours from now. So this is a very much developing story. Yesterday, Justin Trudeau, Prime Minister of Canada, invoked the Emergency Powers Act, something which had clearly been written in the event of like some kind of terrorist attack or some enemy attack, like Canada getting bombed, where it's just like, all right, we don't have time to go through legislative process. Like this is DEFCON, like 9/11. And if there was like a 9/11 incident, I'm sure none of us would be surprised he invoked this because it's a genuine emergency. And I would also note that this act had never been invoked before, and it wasn't, or I think it was invoked, a form of it was invoked previously, but it wasn't invoked after 9/11. And what people who might be too young to remember, when 9/11 hit that day, everyone was wondering, okay, is this just going to be New York, or are things going to start popping off in Europe, in Canada? It was a very legitimate, very rational concern. It wasn't invoked then. And remember, all the flights were grounded. This was a whole huge.
Well, and you also gotta keep in mind that it was like 2 planes hitting the towers in New York, a plane hitting the Pentagon in Washington, D.C., a plane down in Pennsylvania. Like there was this feeling of like, wait, and how many more of these we got in the air right now? And they're like, oh, there's 6,000 planes in the air still. And you're like, whoa.
And not only that, I remember very much listening to the radio as it was happening. And at one point, the reports that the Mall of America was on fire. So it really did feel like this had been very much planned, which it was, but that it was going to be much more massive in scope. And there would be, not only the flights, but, bombs on the ground and just general mayhem, internationally as well, which thank God did not end up happening. So he invoked this as a result of these truckers. 4 of the premiers of different provinces in Canada said this is not active. You should not be doing this, because what it does is it takes away powers from them and basically allows the Canadian federal government to pass edicts, over the wishes of the premiers who govern each individual province, which I think Canada in some ways, and I know the Canadians listening to this are going to get upset and I don't care. In some ways, Canada has much more of a federal system than we do, in that the premiers in certain circumstances might have more powers than governors here, although I'm not a complete expert on that relationship in Canada. What are your thoughts about what's going on over there, and how it's being covered and so on?
Well, I mean, there's a lot to like think about here. I mean, I guess the first thing is like, wow, this is really creepy and it's really terrifying, and I don't think this should be taken lightly. Like when a government declares its own people terrorists, that is a serious thing, and there's been some of that in the United States of America over the last year as well. So that is something, both with the January 6th people and with the parents angry at a public school, school board meetings and stuff like that. And even however you feel about January 6th, I mean, you should, if you're sane, be able to recognize the difference between, terrorists and what January 6th was.
Right.
This is not the same type of thing. This is not killing innocent people for
and targeting motivated. People, not just targeting.
Right. Yeah. Targeting innocent people for politically motivated, reasons. I mean, look, even if they were killing people, it was at Capitol Hill. There were no innocent people there to be killed. But anyway, there's I'm just kidding. Some of the protesters were. But aside from that, it was just cops and politicians. So you couldn't have hit an innocent person with a rock. But
they did. Ashley Babbitt.
Yes, that's right. The cops did kill an innocent person. That's their specialty. But talking about the protesters, no one calls them terrorists, or at least no one besides us. So, so this is like, it's incredibly creepy. It was unbelievably like it was so out of like a Randian novel
Oh yeah,
or
yeah,
like
for
an
sure.
Orwell novel or something like that. I mean, the way he was talking about it was really something to watch. I suggest people watch, we will be giving we will be giving police additional tools. I just love the way they say these things as if they're just like, oh, they're currently working with a Phillips head screwdriver and I'm going to hand them a wrench. We just some new tools. This tool is the right to imprison people for being on a sidewalk. We told them not to be on. This is a really good tool. Anyways, so this is the financial stuff is incredibly creepy, that they're empowering financial companies to seize assets of people. I mean, it's like, okay, well, this is a completely new power, almost outside the scope of government, but granted by government, which are often the worst. I mean, there's not going to be any due process, I'd imagine, attached to that.
Right.
How does that process work? What do they seize your money and then you go, no, I wasn't blocking any roads, and you go, well, good luck proving that.
Yeah, it's like asset forfeiture.
Yeah, right, exactly. So this is a very creepy thing. So yeah, a lot of bad, a lot scary. However, on the flip side of it, it's kind of interesting that in just a matter of, I mean, I think less than 2 weeks, the narrative from the corporate press and the political class switched from this thing is so fringe and so irrelevant that we don't even need to show you the images on the news. And then, of course, now with social media, you're like, well, I don't know. I just saw it and it looked like there were 7,000 trucks and like, you know what I mean? Like 100,000 people down there. Like looks pretty big. But it was so irrelevant, so fringe. This is what Justin Trudeau said. This is a fringe movement. So it went in just a couple of weeks from being a fringe movement to the worst emergency ever.
Yeah.
Like that's quite a, for that to be demonstrated to everybody, for the actual, it's funny, for like in some like kind of Marxist sense, like actually the working class rising up and exercising their power and demanding that, and what they did, which was like, I was thinking about it in comparison to the Black Lives Matter movement, which of course was described as mostly peaceful. This, of course, is extremely violent. The images I'm seeing don't really seem to support those two categorizations. But, this was a movement with very specific policy demands. Like the Black Lives Matter almost turned into this, like, we're against racism and even police brutality. Even that's vague. That's very vague. They'd be much better off if it was like, we are here to end qualified immunity.
Yeah,
like that's a very specific.
Who's for police brutality? No one's for it.
Right, exactly. But here's a policy that actually was passed and signed into law. So someone's for that, and they're very clear. This protest, they want an end to these mandates. It's very clear what they're against, and I think there's something powerful about that, specifically when you got a lot of truckers involved, and truckers are very important to a functioning society.
Hey guys. Love to talk to you about sheath underwear. It's the only underwear I own, and it's the only underwear I wear. And that's because I'm not just the host of You're Welcome. I'm also a sheath underwear model. What a hunk. If you go to sheathunderwear.com and use promo code Malice, you get 20% off your order, and you'll be getting closer to having the most comfortable underwear you're ever going to wear. Why are they so comfortable? Besides the fabric that they're made of, it keeps away the heat, keeps away the moisture. They have special dual pouch technology with one part for one part of your guy's anatomy, one part for another part of your guy's anatomy. You try it on the first time, you're like, what is this? And after, you're like, oh, this is the most comfortable underwear I've ever owned. Support the underwear that supports you. That's Sheath Underwear. Go to sheathunderwear.com and use promo code Malice for 20% off. They have a lot of new styles to choose from, and the style I designed is coming out soon. So you want to get on board with that. Guys, I want to talk to you about fume. Smoking sucks. It sucks money out of your wallet. It sucks health out of your body, and it sucks years off your life. And what's great about fume is that it's a natural inhaler designed for a better, safer way to quit smoking cigarettes. There's no smoke, there's no vape, there's no nicotine replacement, but you'd have that hand-to-mouth habit of smoking, which for so many people is so hard to break. What is a fume? It's made of 100% Canadian maple. They have these cores you stick at the end, which are infused with plant oils to curb cravings. They've got a bunch of different flavors, and all the flavors are 100% natural. No harmful chemicals, no artificial flavors, and absolutely no nicotine. Not only does fume help with the quitting process, they also have support beyond quitting with over a dozen cores for relaxation, energy, and more. It looks really cool. It looks like a steampunk vape. Quitting is tough, but fume can really help, and you owe it to yourself to get healthier. All you have to do is go to breathefume.com/malice. That's BREATHEFUM.com/malice. Use promo code malice and you get 10% off your order. They're really cool looking, got a lot of flavors, and it'll help you get your health back in order. Again, that's breathefume.com, BREATHEFUM.com/malice. Use code malice. You get 10% off your order. You owe it to yourself to stop that filthy habit. Let's get back to the show.
So I don't know. I mean, I guess those are my first. I'm curious. What do you think about all of it?
It was really funny because people on Twitter kept telling me, oh, what's going on with the truckers is a white pill. And I'm like, I don't see it as a white pill at all, because it could very easily go south and they could all be killed, by this government. I wouldn't put it past them, or imprisoned, whatever. I wouldn't put it past the Canadian government at all. That's not what a white pill means to me. It's exciting to see. I'm shocked at how effective they've been. What I'm really excited about with this, I would consider more of a red pill, because it's a great demonstration of how brazenly the media lies. Because you have a group of very diverse working class people, and now they're all Trump voters and they're all like fascists. And it's like, what does fascism have to do one way? What does race have to do with this one way or another? They're not talking about race at all. Their demands are perfectly clear. And many of them are vaccinated. So it just shows how, and Trudeau is lying, and he knows he's lying, and he keeps repeating the lie that, these are racist freaks, and that they're waving swastikas. Like, first of all, you're part of a union or whatever. How are you not getting fired and doxxed if you're waving swastikas on your truck? I think it'll be perfectly appropriate if someone is like part of a trucking company and you're delivering goods from Manitoba to Prince Edward Island, and on your truck you have a swastika, to at least give the guy a call and be like, hey, like, we're trying to like move bananas. So, and like other produce.
Just
like,
random people going, hey, I know the number says, how's my driving? I have a different comment.
And like, why is there Confederate flag? We're Canadians. Like, we didn't fight in that war. So you would think,
and you're really far. You're really far from that part of the war.
So that brazen lying is amazing. I'm also really impressed by, you have a group of, again, blue collar workers, how they all know the games they play now. That because they kept trying to provoke them into violence.
Yeah. And
they know this is what they want, and that they're sitting on their hands. When they came for the gasoline, when they came for the firewood, they didn't fight back, which I thought was so smart, and not just because they knew what would happen if they fought back.
Yeah. So I would say that, to me, that's a bit of a white pill.
Yes,
that's
correct.
A white pill. That's a white pill that people are learning the tricks of the regime and not falling into.
Right. And instead of sitting and arguing, no, I'm not a racist, it's like, knowing this argument is not being made in good faith. You knew it was coming.
Yeah.
And the other thing that I thought was great is when they started threatening these people's kids. Not that part was great, but first of all, it was being such a demonstration of the nature of the level of evil of the enemy class. And also the fact that the truckers still didn't take the bait, and they were still like, okay, they got angry, but they're like, we're not going to get provoked into violence. So that, I think, is all really wonderful in terms of, this is a bit of a war, and understanding the tactics and strategies of the enemy and not playing into their hands.
Yeah, no, right. So I agree. I agree with all of that. And I think that you're correct. Like, to recognize that it's not, like when you said at the beginning that it's not exactly a white pill, just that they're out there protesting, because you recognize this is dangerous. And even like what's going on right now, this is dangerous. It's very dangerous to be the kind of visible enemy of the state at this location, in this place. And this is what I'm saying. And I think because we've spent so much time really thinking about the nature of what a state is, and most people don't, that, it's like, you realize, it's like, no, dude, I remember talking about this when they had the Chaz thing going in Seattle there. And I was like trying to explain to these people, and then try to explain it again to like January 6th people. that it was like, you guys have no idea what you're messing with.
Yeah, yeah.
Like all of you guys have no idea. It's like you guys out there in Chaz who are having your little fun and doing your little hippie experiment and seizing some property and we're starting the revolution. You exist because they have decided this suits their interests to allow you to exist. And if they decided it didn't, they will Waco you, motherfucker. Like they will burn you alive and lose no sleep over it.
Oh, they
And
brag. They take pictures of the ashes.
Yes, that's right. And I remember saying this. I did a live stream on January 6th that night. And I remember saying that. I was like, man, what I'm seeing out of this is like, I go, look, first, I think this is a disaster. I think that it's not a disaster for the reason the corporate press is saying. I don't think like, oh my God, they almost overturned our precious democracy or something like that, you know, but it's a disaster because all this is going to do is like ruin people's lives and then be the perfect excuse for the state to come in and do all types of crackdowns and stuff like this. And, you know, you see these people there is like farting on Nancy Pelosi's desk and doing all this shit that was funny. It was like entertaining to watch, but you're like, guys, you have no idea. You're living in this BoomerCon fantasy of like, hey, it's the people's house, so I guess I get to walk in here and do this. And it's like, no, it's not the people's house, it's the war criminals' house. And they are about, and that guy who did that has probably been sitting in solitary confinement since that day. You know what I mean? Like this is they're so the truckers, it's like, I don't want to like just be like, yeah, you guys go, you know, do it, without like being like, hey, look, go in eyes open, knowing that like this carries real risks with it. However, it's going to be very interesting to see how this plays out. I agree with you. I think it's a real white pill that they weren't taking the bait. I think it'll be interesting to see how much this actually freaks out the ruling elite, because I do think that things like this are what they fear. There's a reason they work very, very hard to keep the population docile, keep them pitted against each other. They don't like this type of thing. Like you have to think like if you're like in the billionaire class or the corporate press class or the political class or something like that, it's like you've kind of got a good racket here. Your biggest fear is that the people rise up and like rip you out of your home.
It's also like makes you look really bad when you're exposed as kind of powerless. Because the promise is you give me the power and I'm going to keep you safe. So, and now I'm not keeping you safe. I'm not holding up my end of the bargain. I'm causing, you're at home, you're distressed. You're seeing these guys defy me. There's nothing I could do about it. That does not make me look good.
No, that's absolutely right. And that's all right. It's all kind of based off an illusion that they have all of this power, which they don't. They really don't. There's way more people than there are members of the ruling elite. And so that's another thing. And that truckers have a lot of power, which is kind of, by the way, I think in a sense, the argument that like free market types have been making against the communist types for a long time. That's like, this idea that the whole dynamic is like the employer holds 100% of the power and the employee holds 0, and there's just nothing I could do. I mean, what could little old me do? It's like, yeah, well, if the boss says work for $1 an hour, I'll work for $1 an hour. Like he's got, but that's just really not the case. It's a good demonstration of that actually, like, people, we really need trucks. We really need people to drive those trucks. Like, this is a very important job. It's amazing how easy it is to be removed from that in our society today, because like, I don't know, like me and you are just sitting here talking through a computer to each other. What do we need truckers for? Even things that like directly like are the result of truckers. I'm like, I don't need truckers. I go on my computer and pick what I want on Amazon, and then it's here, and then it gets here because Amazon sent it. Half the time I don't even see the guy who dropped it off at the door, but it's like, oh, there was someone who drove it there.
What else I found very edifying about this whole situation with the truckers is that Rand, in one of her novels, you referenced her earlier, she was talking about, I think it was Ellsworth Toohey, who was the antagonist of the Fountainhead. And I think it was Ellsworth, whatever the character was, the description was, but behind the smile, there was something evil. And when you see these blue checks, these political pundits or journalists, whatever, on Twitter, the absolute bloodthirsty rage that they feel, it's not the same as with Trump. It's really like these people must be destroyed, because when they cannot handle defiance. For people who claim to believe in democracy and, decentralized, not decentralized, but like multi-pole democracy, where it's like, you're going to have people rotating between different powers, to have a group to tell them no, the mask really drops. and you can see these people they want you dead, but will settle for your submission.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I think that what, a lot of people pointed this out, including Trump himself. And because people recognize this is a big part of the reason why so many Trump supporters were such diehard Trump supporters, is that they recognized that the corporate press didn't hate Trump. He hated them. They hated them. They hated his supporters, and that's why they liked him, because he was a big middle finger to the people who hated them, or at least a big part of why they liked him. But what's different with this situation is that there is no Trump there. It's just the people. It's obvious that you just have contempt for the people.
Oh, they're trying to make it out that it's Trump. You know that, right?
Oh, yeah. Well, they try their best to try to fit something in there, but there's no pretending this is, and you see it now in the corporate press more so than ever when they talk about the unvaccinated as if it's this group that you're not also supposedly tasked with representing and reporting information to, and blah, blah. I mean, they are just these people are hated by these corporate press types. And that's interesting in itself to just see that be so revealed. That's one of the really interesting things over the last couple of years, is how much particularly with the vaccine regime rising up, because the COVID regime should almost be separated into the 2020 COVID regime and then the 2021 now going into 22 vaccine regime.
Yeah,
because in the COVID regime, it was well, the heroes were the essential workers and the healthcare professionals, until the vaccine regime rose up and those same people decided, oh, you're one of those heroes and you're not taking my jab. Well, then you're now you're Mr. Trucker now, who we were supposed to be so thankful for in 2020, Miss Unvaccinated Nurse, who we were giving applause to at 6 p.m., when you came home from work. Well, now we want you ruined.
Yeah.
We want you. It's amazing how quickly they can turn on you. All of a sudden you go from this is straight out of right after the Bolshevik Revolution. They start putting commies against the wall. It's oh shit, that's pretty crazy that you could be right on board with the, oh yeah, we're doing this revolution together, and then boom, you're done now. It's unbelievable to watch, and hopefully at least enough people see that to kind of realize that it's yeah, you're not safe either. Don't think you're safe. That's my biggest message to normie Democratic voters. They just talk about how these right wingers who you hate so much, well, they supported this war on terrorism, and now it's being turned inward against them, and now you're supporting it because it's being turned against them. But I bet they were pretty confident under Bush and Cheney that there's no way this war that was just getting Muslim terrorists was ever going to be turned against them. So maybe you shouldn't be so confident that this thing couldn't come for you too, as crazy as it sounds now.
Hey guys, you ever feel like you're being followed around the internet and maybe advertisers know a bit too much about you? So Ipvanish VPN helps you take back your privacy and helps you become anonymous on the internet. So it's a virtual private network, a VPN for short, which is a tool that helps you browse the internet. You can use Ipvanish on your computer, tablet, phone, Fire Stick when you stream media. When you use a VPN, all your data is encrypted. What you're reading, what you're watching, what you're searching, whatever it is you're doing. And it's important because what you're doing on the internet isn't anyone's business but yours. Ipvanish is offering for listeners of the show 65% off their annual plan. It's only $375 a month to protect yourself. Super easy to use, even for you boomers. You turn it on with one click and it runs in the background to protect you while you're browsing the web. If you run into a problem, Ipvanish has 24/7 support by email, chat, and phone. All you got to do is go to ipvanish.com/malice. Use promo code MALICE, MALICE. You get 65% off. Their annual plan is just $44.99 for a year with our discount. This is the time to sign up. Ipvanish is the best. They've got 4.7 out of 5 on Trustpilot with more than 6,000 reviews. All you got to remember is ipvanish.com/malice to get the deal and start protecting your data online. Hey guys, we got a different kind of sponsor for this episode. It's the Jordan Harbinger Show. It's a podcast you really should be listening to. Every day someone tells you have to listen to this podcast. You have to listen to You're Welcome. You have to listen to Part of the Problem. Those people don't know what they're talking about. Jordan Show, which Apple named one of the best of 2018, is aimed at making you a better informed, more critical thinker so you get a sense of how the world actually works. Each episode is a conversation with a guest, and there's something for everyone. One episode, he's talking to a hostage negotiator from the FBI. Another episode, he's talking to a cinematographer who discovered a lost city in the jungle and made a major archaeological find. We really enjoy this show here at Podcast One, and think you will as well. Search for the Jordan Harbinger Show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you listen to podcasts. And here are some URLs to get more info. If you go to jordanharbinger.com/subscribe, you can download it there. Apple Podcasts at jordanharbinger.com/iTunes. And to learn more about Jordan as a host, jordanharbinger.com/about. Let's get back to the show. Here's something else I was absolutely delighted about. The Ukrainian president, Zelensky, I believe is his name, was told by media reports that Putin was going to attack on Wednesday, meaning today when this is airing. He went forward and said this. Then those reports were found to be inaccurate. And he said, okay, I'm told this being no longer the case. That was reported as he said he heard this and now he backtracked, or he takes back his story. And what was beautiful on social media, which is still increasingly how people get their news. It's not as much as sitting at home watching the nightly news or CNN or Fox, but how all these journalists were called out. Like, wait a minute, you lied to him. He learned the truth. He didn't walk back anything.
Yeah.
This was first you lied to him about what was happening, and then you lied about what he said, and now you're lying about his reaction. So to see these machinations gives me a lot of hope, because if this had been 20 years ago, it would have been a hell of a lot easier to get those boots on the ground in Ukraine and to have everyone in America be like, we can't let Putin's another, all of a sudden they'd remember Stalin. All of a sudden they'd remember to hate him. Oh yeah, Stalin, that guy, he was bad, right? And it would be easy to whip people up. It's not working this time, in my opinion.
Well, it's very interesting. I think this is a point that you've made a lot over the probably since like around 2016. I've heard you make this point several times, that I think is a really underappreciated point, because everyone's always talking about how polarized the country is and what an obvious negative thing that is. Like, well, it's so bad because the country's at each other's guts, and there certainly are elements of it that are not good. You know, like there are things where when people's personal lives are like so obsessed with politics, you hear this thing like families not talking to each other over politics, and all this stuff is like so weird and bizarre. And it's not great, because it ends up making people hyper focus on politics and blindly get behind their guy because he's the only one fighting against the other side. Like there, but you made the point that usually when the worst policies happen, it's because the people are united and galvanized around one leader. And when you live in this type of like, you know, like white hot culture war environment, it's virtually impossible for any major policy to get, you know, kind of like a broad support between the left and right half of America. And a major policy is a new war. And we have not had a new one since 2016, and there have been pushes for them. There was a push for a war in Venezuela. There was a push for a war in Iran. There's been a push for a war in Ukraine now, and none of them have been able to pull it off.
Even Hong Kong, which would make the most sense to me.
Right. And there's but the thing that's crazy is like the idea of like fighting a war against Russia or China is just like logistically impossible.
Right.
Like, I mean, it's like, oh, well, then we all die. I don't get like what. How does this work? This isn't like rolling into Baghdad, you know what I mean? But it's real interesting that they kind of like keep having to back down off of these things. And part of that is just
Syria. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but Syria is another huge one.
Yeah, no, that's true. That was a big one. I mean, we did end up getting a covert war there, but we didn't get the war Obama wanted. He wanted another Iraq war in Syria. And so it's kind of interesting to see this. It's partly, I think, because the propaganda outlets have been discredited. You can find out the truth more easily. And it's also just partly because like the average Donald Trump supporter ain't going to support Joe Biden, leading him into a war. He's not even the real president. You know what I mean? And the average Democratic voter wasn't going to support Trump being led into a thing because he's Trump, you know? But
I think also a lot of these military families, unfortunately, after the Iraq war, when they're like, wait, this was all for nothing. Like, it's like my kid is in a wheelchair or in a coffin, and what do I have to show for it? I mean, I think a lot of the, or PTSD. I mean, I think a lot of these vets, it's not some fringe minority, still talk about, they're like, I was so naive. I thought this was the result of 9/11. This is what I had to do. And it was complete BS from beginning to end. And, they talk to each other and they're like, this is nonsense.
And it's also just not nearly, so I think you're absolutely right about that. I think that's a huge factor. I also think that there's something about the conflict between Russia and Ukraine where the sale involves really naked imperialism.
Yeah.
And this is a term that I know, like, sometimes people who are on the right get a little like, well, it's imperialism. Like, you kind of sound like a lefty or something if you say that. But I mean, it's not. That's the term Pat Buchanan uses, and that's the term. You know what I mean? There's a whole lot of right wingers who will say this, like, yeah, this is a real empire mentality that we're not even saying, oh, Iraq has nuclear weapons and they're working with Osama bin Laden, so we think there's a real chance they could hand off nuclear weapons to Osama bin Laden and then they could launch them in Chicago or whatever. Like, this is just, we know they have nuclear weapons. They've had nuclear weapons forever, and we've had a ceasefire. Even when it was Stalin there, like, we didn't like fucking launch nuclear weapons against each other, So like, whatever. Or did they had nukes by Stalin, right?
Stalin got him later.
Yeah, they got him later after the Second World War. That's right.
Yes.
Right. And so but so this is, we're really going, like, the pitch here is we must protect the territorial sanctimony of the Ukraine.
Yeah.
And it's just like the idea,
not of the Ukraine, of Ukraine.
Of Ukraine, that's right, excuse me. But the idea that, like, the middle country of North America, should go over and tell you, no, Ukraine, you are not a part of Russia. Like, I don't fucking know why. Because that commie Gorbachev decided they weren't, even though a commie before that decided they were. Right. And then this one decided. I mean, they had in the what's it called there? I always mispronounce the Donbass province, I believe, which is like the way eastern part of Ukraine. They had a referendum in, I think, 2015 over whether they should be a part of Russia or a part of the Ukraine. And it's like the vast majority there are ethnic Russians. And they voted overwhelmingly to be a part of Russia. And Putin didn't want them. He's like, no, you're not coming here. But okay, so this province that votes overwhelmingly to be a part of Russia versus Ukraine, is it so self-evident that no, they must be a part of Ukraine? Like, they can't, is it so obvious that Crimea shouldn't be part of Russia? I mean, they were incorporated into Russia, I think, in like 1780 something, you know what I mean? Like, it's just not, and then like left in like the early 90s. I mean, I don't know. I could understand. I would be more than willing to listen to someone I knew who's like from Ukraine or from Russia tell you what their thoughts are, but I don't feel as like a New Yorker that I have like some, like strong opinion about, like, well, we got to send our boys to go die over there to make sure that this just doesn't, I don't know, doesn't make sense. And there's no sale that, like, Ukraine is such a great country. Oh, they're so free and democratic, and that's why we have to support them. Like, really? I don't think so.
I mean, what about the troubles between Northern Ireland and Ireland, in the UK, and that big divide? And it's Ireland was historically one country. Obviously, now it's divided between Protestant and Catholic. And if we got involved, there would be, I mean, we got involved to some extent diplomatically, but if we send troops, it would be bizarre. To say the least. Now, my understanding, even though I was born in Ukraine, is still very limited, but my understanding, which I'm fairly sure is universally agreed on, is that Western Ukraine regards itself as far more affiliated with Europe and European culture. Lvov, they call it Lviv now, where I was born, was part of Galicia and very much this kind of cosmopolitan city of the world. And Eastern Ukraine, as you pointed out, does very much more affiliate with Russia in many contexts. So yeah, you do kind of have this situation where it's not at all obvious that the borders as they are have to stand, and it's not at all, and it's certainly not at all obvious to anyone that it's involved. We have to go in there and have boots on the ground.
Yeah, and it's also like,
and where does it end?
Right. And what drives me crazy is that it is like, there's this, oh my God, if you want to talk about like getting like binary thinkers coming after you, try ever saying that, like, I don't think we should go to war in Syria. And it's like, oh, so you're an Assad apologist? It's like, so those are my options. My options are either that I have to literally, like, it's like, if you don't want to like send your like our 17-year-olds to go in a like bloodbath, then I have to love the guy. Like, those are the only options I have. But look, I mean, it's not even like, Putin is, after all, the head of a government. I'm not saying he's a good guy, but you could also look at this and just go, okay, look, Russia's ask in this situation seems to be pretty reasonable to me. And the idea that Russia is some type of threat, nobody, like Germany is not worried at all.
Yeah.
Nobody is worried that this country with a smaller GDP than Italy, a smaller GDP. Yes, they have a GDP of like $1.5 trillion. They're smaller than Brazil. They're smaller than Italy. It's like the idea that we can't afford to be a world empire, but Russia, you think, can afford this? I mean, the thing would collapse before it even got started. But they're not even, there's no even indication other than our liars in Washington D.C. saying they're going to take the Ukraine. No one, they could have done this at many different times. There seems to be what they don't want is Ukraine and NATO. What they don't want is our military up to their border, which we would lose our shit about. This is kind of like their Cuban Missile Crisis. Like, no, listen, look, we used to, after the Cold War, right? Or say during the Cold War, but even, right? Where was the line? The line was down Germany, right? And everything to the east was control of Russia, and everything to the west was control of NATO and the US and European countries, right? That line has now gone from the middle of Germany all the way over now to being now. I mean, okay, then Ukraine isn't technically in NATO, but the line we're talking about is between Ukraine and, they said, I saw the other day, but they said that it was like the Hillary Clinton line. They said on the news that I think it was on CNN, where they said Russia has troops right on Ukraine's border. And you're like, well, another way to put that is on Russia's border. Like it's their border. I mean, like it's like if we had troops, like protecting our border with Mexico, and we go, we're right on Mexico's border. I mean, this is like a crazy way to look at things. There has been, after George H.W. Bush, who was the president when the Soviet Union collapsed, promised that NATO would not expand to the east at all. That was his promise to the Russians at the time. Everybody's expanded it. I mean, Bill Clinton expanded NATO, and George W. Bush expanded NATO, and Barack Obama expanded NATO. There's something like 7 former Soviet countries that are in NATO at this point. And it seems reasonable to me, like in the same way that it seems reasonable to me for the United States of America to say to the commies, you can't put nukes on Cuba. That's a no-go for us. Like, that's an act of war. If you do that, sorry. We can't have that. We can't have nuclear weapons pointed at us a few miles off of our coast. That's unacceptable. That seems reasonable to me. And for them to say, yeah, you guys can't have war games going on like on our border. That also seems reasonable. It's hard for me to look at that and go, yeah, they're the aggressors here.
I'm Dave Detman, also known as Dr. Gadget. I've got a new podcast called The Big Idea. And every week I talk to inventors and visionaries who made it big in their respective industries. We'll tackle weekly trending tech, provide inside tips for your success, and go deep dives on the latest and greatest innovations. And I know you're going to love this part. I'll also have plenty of free giveaways. Who doesn't love free stuff? So listen to and follow The Big Idea with me, Dr. Gadget, on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Podcast One, and wherever you get your podcasts.
Yeah, this is actually a big argument every year in North Korea, because there are war games practiced every year with American troops and South Korean troops. And they're like, look, you're rehearsing invading us. Like this, you're telling us this is not a provocation. And President Trump, I believe, or even it may have even been George W. Bush or Obama, I don't remember who it was at this point. They agreed to stop as a means to kind of like, all right, let's try to cool down relationships. And to some extent, these certainly have a point. You're doing the dress rehearsal. It's not crazy to think that you're getting ready for the play.
Like, can you imagine if I just like came up, like me and a bunch of like thugs just came up to your door and started rehearsing how we would break into your house and like kill you, and then it was like kind of like, so we're still on for lunch tomorrow, and you'd be like, I want to talk about that whole thing yesterday, like
murdering,
like,
burglary.
You go, why would you have such a smile on your face while you were doing? Why when you had that Michael Malice doll where you saying like, I've always waited to do this? Like that's just seems that's weird for our friendship.
Here's another one. Are you? I know you're probably not surprised, but are you? I don't want to put the word in your mouth. What is your reaction to? I'm sure you have the same analysis I do. How brazen the pulling back of COVID restrictions for political reasons is. Like overnight, it's like, okay, we're not gonna wear masks anymore. It's like, it's not like the data was all of a sudden Omicron's gone.
No, you're wrong. The science changed.
Yeah.
The science did change. And now we're not sure masks work and all this stuff. It's really, yeah, it is something. Although I'm I'm pleased to see what we're seeing. Because I just think the COVID regime is like the worst thing. And it's really destroyed so much of the country and so many people's lives. So it's nice to see that. I said when the Omicron variant first came out, and I was talking about this even before it was in America, that I thought Omicron looked like it might be the thing that busted up this whole thing, and not just because it would be too self-evident, because all of the evidence seemed to suggest, which has been borne out, but this was just like reading like what actually following the science and reading like what was going on in South Africa, where they're like, well, look, this is a much more contagious variant. It's much less deadly, and it's much more resistant to the vaccine. And if you have that, it's kind of tough to keep this whole illusion going. Even during this whole trucker Canada, it's so funny. It's like out of a comedy that Justin Trudeau bails because he's got COVID, which who knows if that's real or not. But even if it is real, it's like, oh, so no, we have to keep these, vaccine mandates in place. By the way, here's your vaccinated, boosted prime minister who's young and healthy. Gotta run. I got COVID. I'm real sick. Like, okay. So all of that, I mean, people just see it. People see it tearing through their vaccinated and unvaccinated friends alike and family members alike. And once it's this contagious and not as deadly, you realize you can't mitigate this. You really can't mitigate a highly contagious upper respiratory virus. It's just, they spread. That's what they're going to do. And so I thought the mix of that and the fact that the Democrats are now the party in control, this is no longer useful to try to get Trump out of office. You have midterm elections coming up. The Biden is a disaster. Kamala Harris is the next one off the bench. And it's like, holy shit, what are we going to do? So I think it's a lot of that. And people, and it's not a fringe group who are against it. So I'm happy to see it. It's unbelievable though. I'll tell you, after the corporate press support of the Black Lives Matter protests, nothing shocks me anymore. To me, that was the one that it was coming right off the heels of 3 months of you cannot leave your house you're an evil person. Like if you, oh my God, these horrible kids who went to the beach, like they were demonizing everyone. And then all of a sudden it was like, oh no, this one is cool.
Yeah, take to the streets or else you're racist.
Yeah, like, and it was just so bizarre. I was like, wait, so we're not? So you were never really worried about the virus. This is all just fucking gaslighting. So, but it's pretty incredible to watch. It's pretty incredible to watch the same people just go up there and say the shit that would have gotten you like banned off Twitter a month earlier. It's something.
What's going on right now with the restrictions in New York?
So I got to read up on this more, but I guess there is a proposal now to, I think the latest proposal I saw is that they would walk back the vax requirements if you had mask mandates indoors. However, this is coming from what I saw, at least was coming out of Albany. And so it's anybody's guess how New York City will choose to, implement this. So I don't know. I'm really hoping that the whole vaccine passport system goes away sometime soon.
Yeah, I mean, it's just amazing how quickly. Because the thing is, I'm sure people remember, I certainly remember when this first started getting rolled out, Cuomo was saying, okay, you can only have 75% of people in the office. Then it was 50, then it was 25, then everyone has to stay at home. I would have thought that they would be pulling back in stages because that makes sense. Like if you are dealing with a pandemic, okay, let's loosen the spigot a little. Let's see how this plays out. Give me a week. Okay, things have been spiking. Let's loosen it more. That's kind of how, and it's like, okay, as of tomorrow, it's all gone. It's like, whoa. Like, then why was it here to begin with if you could just shut it off overnight? So that to me is kind of a little bit surprising that they're not even doing the dance of kind of pretending that this is something that they're wait and see, and we're playing by the science and we don't get ahead of ourselves.
Well, it was. I thought that Texas really kind of was interesting for that reason. I have a whole bit about it that I'm doing in my stand up these days. But like, is so interesting that they just stopped was like one day in Texas, they just went like, all the restrictions are done.
Yeah.
And it's just there's something so fascinating about that, because it just kind of lets you know, like, oh, that's an option. We could just stop doing this.
Yeah.
And everything's fine. I mean, I shouldn't say everything's fine. Like, COVID is a nasty virus. And if you're very sick and you really don't want to get COVID if you're very sick, but it's no different. It's no better or worse than it would be with the restrictions. And if again, our boy Tom Woods, that thing he made is so great, that quiz.
Oh yeah.
The COVID quiz. Did you ever take it?
No,
it's pretty
I haven't.
hilarious to look at. I took it and gave it like a real shot. Like, I'm really going to try to guess what I think this is. And it's just basically following curves of COVID outbreaks. And you have to guess where the mask mandates came in, where the lockdowns came in, where this is. It's like, okay, this is this curve, this is this curve. Where did the mask mandate come in? Which state had this? Was this a lockdown state or not like that? And the whole point of the quiz is you cannot pass it. Like, it's just impossible. It's so clear by the end of it that you go, there is no even like slight correlation between the way this curve is and what policies were there. Which kind of makes sense if you think about it. But it's interesting to see. It's interesting that they feel like they can just get rid of the restrictions if they want to, because I don't think any of them really believe this shit anymore.
This is a tough question, but I want to ask, do you think that, God forbid, there's going to be bloodshed regarding the truckers?
I think for there to be bloodshed, we're a few steps away from that. It's not to say that it's impossible.
I agree with that.
I think lives ruined by the state cracking down, we're not a few steps away from that.
Correct.
So that's
the
quite
next
possible. That's right. That's the next step. And that's pretty bad too. Bloodshed is like if they all return. If they all fucking return and go right back to protesting, many of them have left now during this emergency order. They all come back and return and have a real challenge standoff with the state. Does the state back down at that point? I mean, it's possible. It's possible that they would say, it's in our self-interest to back down here, take our loss and recede, kind of scorch earth.
They wouldn't say it that
back.
way, but yeah, they
yes,
would
yes, but right. They would present it in a different way, but that would be the move. But at that point, it's not impossible. Man, I really hope it doesn't come to that. And I know that a lot of people out there, I see a lot of like bravado on Twitter and stuff, where people go, Americans got all these guns. When are we going to start using them? And it's like, yeah, dude, you do not want to go in that direction. That is a very, very bad direction once you go in there. And that you have no idea what the end result of all of that is. You may never be able to get back to an even manageable situation after that. But I don't, so I don't think it's going to come to that. But the odds are a lot higher now than they were a month ago.
Yeah, for sure.
So, so it's something to keep our eyes on for sure.
Dave, we're running out of time. What has been your favorite part of this interview?
My favorite part, as always, is just seeing that beautiful face again.
In the mirror. You are welcome.
This February on Pluto TV, we're putting the spotlight on iconic Black talent. Watch your favorite movies like Top 5, 48 Hours, and More Than a Game. And drop in to binge Black TV classics like The Bernie Mac Show and Moesha. Pluto TV has hundreds of channels and thousands more movies and TV shows, all for free. So download the Pluto TV app on your favorite streaming device and start watching today. Pluto TV, drop in, watch free.